Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today. Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about Poland. For those of you not into geography, Poland's to the east of Germany, to the southeast of Sweden, and to the northeast of Hungary, and to the west of Russia. So that'll give you an idea. It's got a lot of coastline on the Baltic Sea. Now, a few days ago, there was allegedly a huge protest march in Poland with the good pro-globalist citizens of Poland demonstrating on a grassroots it was, demonstration against the evil fascist right-wing government of Poland. This government supposedly is, according to the globalist media at least, it's undemocratic, it's evil, it's oppressive, it's unconstitutional, it's illegal, it's illegitimate, it's all of the things that they say about Donald Trump, interestingly, same sort of attacks. I went to have a look about this protest, which allegedly had over 500,000 people attending, spontaneous grassroots, mind you, and the entire first page of the search, the Google search, was pro-globalist propaganda stories. The government was bad, evil, they're all fucking Nazis. And the proof of this is all these people demonstrating. The people must be right. These spontaneous grassroots protests must be right. The government must be evil. Fascist Nazis, quite possibly Hitler. So now the whole first page of the search was those sort of stories, really hyped up sort of propaganda about how evil and they do it by the standard association. The government, which has been accused by the EU of being Nazis and fascists, and where the people go, professor of law at such and such says that Hitler and fascism, Hitler and Nazis, So the constant, and if they weren't using Hitler, it was fascist. They weren't using fascist, it was Nazi, and they were breaking democratic norms, and so on. So accusing of being anti-democratic. Now this is the EU, which has, the administrative part of the EU, which has no democracy whatsoever, and a stacked court of political activists in the EU telling Poland that they're undemocratic. I mean, the chutzpah of that's over the top. So then I went to the second page on the Google search, and on the second last item there was second last news story rather. There was an item that was not a globalist controlled media outlet. They seemed pretty even-handed from what I can tell, and they laid out, at least more succinctly, the argument. So from that, I was then able to find other news stories. But we're talking the third or fourth page of the search that most people won't even get to. In fact, hardly any will get to that. I think by the third page, less than 1% of researchers have got that. So, whereas all the top stories were all the super pro-globalization things. Poland's bad, Nazis. So there was very little attempt to actually be accurate on the part of it. Now, when you get a news story or an alleged news story that's trying so hard to come down on one side, then you know it's not objective news reporting. So let's just have a look at the Polish thing now. Over 500,000 people supposedly march, and this is against the anti-democratic right wing, or as described as the far right. They're anti-democratic. They've broken democratic norms. They've corrupted the law. They've broken the law. And they're listed, but there's no specifics. It's all vague. It's all sort of very general assertions. Now, when you sort of search for facts, these hot air balloon type stories, they've got sort of nothing in them. It's hard to find facts, and they just quote activists as saying those guys are bad. They don't claim the activist is an activist. They try and present this radical activist, these NGO screamers, and they present them as if they're independent observers or analysts, of course, which is which is absurd. So here's sort of the best that I can ascertain without having a serious sort of drill down involving masses of research on my part. But the overall architecture of this is that Eastern Europe, when they came out of the communist era, they started to go back to sort of a very nationalistic or more nationalistic sort of position, because their culture and their customs, their history had been heavily suppressed by the Soviet communists. So an ideology was enforced them, which meant the eradication of their history and so on. Now, nobody likes that. Instead of trying to co-opt people into the communist system and say, well, this is why it's good, this is how it will benefit you, this is why it's better. Instead of doing that, the ideological fanatics never go down that path. They force it at the point of a gun. You don't agree, you'll end up in prison and that sort of thing. So I don't know if that was ever really going to work. And that sort of suppression just keeps those tensions simmering, in my view. People quietly avoid commenting on things while the threat of going to prison or being arbitrarily arrested or detained or killed even is on the cards, but it doesn't go away. And the same with Poland. They wanted to reassert their national identity, and they were still quite homogenous, really, in many ways. So that national Poles. So they wanted not only independence from the communists, but they wanted to have their nation state with their culture and their history and so on properly celebrated and the like. Now, this is something that goes against this new world order of one happy family within this sort of utopia where everyone's the same, and you can't accept any physical differences between anybody, whether it be races or genders or sexual. But ideology is the dividing line. So if you don't think the right way, they'll kill you or crush you or marginalise you. But you're not allowed to see any difference between black and white people, men and women, or gay and straight or anything. That's all sort of an equality thing there. And those devices, to do with race and LGBTQ, are designed they're simply devices to destroy society as it currently exists and replace it with this so-called new world order of new world order type citizen. The people that are mostly pushing it are ones that they themselves believe they're immune from the effects of it, so that they're hardly advocates. They're advocates for other people, but not for themselves. But coming now to the Polish thing, the Polish issue, the Polish government was democratically elected, and their platform was, we're not going to allow mass migration of incompatible people. Now, it doesn't mean that third world peasants can't come, but they have to really integrate within the society. They have to speak Polish. They have to, they can't congregate in ghettos. They must integrate. They must have some relevant skills that are needed, and they must speak Polish. Now, that's hardly a big ask. They're coming but that's an outrage to the globalists who want to flood all the white countries with brown and black peasants. That's how they're going to undermine all white societies. But that's one of the key devices for doing it. So if any government like the Polish government objects to that or opposes it, then they're defying this new world order movement, and that won't be tolerated. Democratically elected governments deciding what their people want or what the people have decided through the ballot box, that is an outrage. That is but instead of but the globalists who again aren't themselves accountable to democratic processes, the globalists will point to the poll and say, well, you're the ones defying democracy, because democracy in New World Order terms mean doing what the globalists want. That means democracy. Democracy is expressed through the will of the people. Well, the people decided they liked Hitler. So the democratic vote means fascism is Nazi, it means Hitler. And so that's the rationale, the absurd, insane, low IQ rationale that they use. So and it's the thinking that permeates, this white privilege thing. Well, the president of the United States is white and male, therefore all white males are president of the United States. Again, an absurd proposition, but that's the type of thinking these morons bring to the table. They'll destroy us all yet if they can. So the Polish government says no to mass migration. Sure, people want to come to Poland. They speak Polish and all that sort of stuff. Hey, happy to talk about it. But they won't accept mass migration in the same way that the fully globalist controlled United States and United Kingdom and Canada and so on do Australia. Now, the other thing is the Poles won't accept LGBTQ indoctrination in the education system. The gender studies courses don't get, as I understand it, don't get government funding. So if you want to do special courses on how to hate Poland or how to hate white people or how to hate Polish society or how to hate Polish history, then you've got to pay for it yourself. The government won't subsidise it, or in some cases won't even permit it. Now, again, this is seen as an outrage by the globalists because, again, these things are key weapons they use for undermining all white societies, destroying white history, eradicating white history. And without those weapons, those devices to do it, then the globalists can't crush that particular society or that particular nation state, Poland in this case, or Hungary in another case. So to them, it's an outrage, and they go full propaganda and go, well, they're the ones, they're denying democracy and so on, which of course is utter and total nonsense. It's the globalists that are taking away democracy. It's the globalists that are taking away the rule of law. It's the globalists that are destroying due legal process. It's the globalists with their lies and their treachery and their trickery and their deceptions, not the Polish government. Now, the previous governments in Poland had been somewhat successful in inserting activist judges into the courts. And the globalists are very pleased with this, of course, because that's another undermining the judiciary and its independence is another device they use. The Polish government was quite concerned about this, so they wanted judges to declare their affiliation with NGOs. Now, as we know, there's an army of NGOs around the world, all globalist controlled. There's hardly any that are not now. And these judges that were being appointed had been specially trained and activist, radicalised by these NGOs, were on the payroll of the NGOs. The NGOs were supplying the judges' offices with clerks and operatives and administrative staff and so on that were also radicalised and paid for by the NGOs. Now, the Polish government quite rightly thought, no, we want independent judges that make decisions based on the laws of Poland. And there's hardly anything wrong with that. That's fine. That's how it's meant to be. But again, to the globalists, they were outraged that they're undermining and corrupting and subverting of the Polish. They were outraged that their undermining and corrupting and subverting of the Polish state was being thwarted by a democratically elected government, elected by the will of the people. What an outrage. What an outrage. We're the globalists. We're in charge here. We don't have damn peasants voting for governments and deciding what laws and policies will be. We decide, not the fucking white peasants. We decided, say the globalists, and they were outraged by this. Now, it's an eminently sensible law, and I think this should be around all the Western countries, but given how essential the NGO mechanisms and devices and infrastructure is for imposing the globalist will on erstwhile democratic nations, then of course the globalists are going to kick up a fuss because you've taken away one of their prime weapons. And there are various other sort of initiatives that the Polish government took. Politicians, for example, have to declare their affiliations to NGOs and activist groups. Now, this neutralises, imagine if all the politicians in Australia or America or Britain had to declare their affiliations with the NGO infrastructure, the globalist funded NGO infrastructure. It could completely change the mix and type of politicians that were there. You could have 80-90% of politicians all compromised by NGOs in one form or another. and they could be out, and so you only get people that care about the country getting elected. And again, this would be an outrage to the globalists. We don't want people that care, English politicians caring about England or Britain. We don't want that. We want people who are owned and controlled and directed by the globalist machine. This idea that a politician elected by the British people would care and think anything about Britain at all is an outrage. People that care about their citizens and the folks that elected them are Hitler. And so this is the thing that this is the clash with Poland. And you've just got the globalists attempting to impose their will on a sovereign nation, and that sovereign nation saying, no, we decide what happens inside our borders. And that's really what it's all about. Now, this supposed 500,000 plus demonstration that went on in Poland, primarily in Warsaw, a few days ago, the independent news sources vary and say that the numbers were up to 200,000. The pro-globalist media outlets say it was over 500,000. It doesn't matter. 200,000 is still a lot of people. So suddenly we've got this spontaneous uprising of 200,000 people demonstrating from all over Poland. Now, Poland's not a rich country, so it'd be quite expensive for people to travel from some of these other places to Warsaw. So what no one's done is looked at the role of NGOs in getting people to get to Warsaw to do these. So you've got all these people appearing. That's a lot of people. Again, whether it's 200 or 500,000, doesn't matter. It's a lot of people. These people come from all over Poland. They've had to be transported to Warsaw. And Poland's a decent-sized country. It's not that cheap for people that don't make much money anyway to get from one end of Poland to the other. So they have to travel to Warsaw. Then they have to somehow find accommodation. That's a lot of people to find accommodation for. And they have to be fed and given water and all this sort of stuff. This is a massive logistical operation, and we're supposed to believe that up to 500,000 Polish citizens decided to just up and travel all that way to get to and have this demonstration and be carefully coordinated with media and photographs. No, that's bullshit. So clearly there was a huge NGO, a huge and expensive NGO operation to achieve this. Coordinated with international media, very pro-globalist international media, and then coordinated again with the legal decision about Poland's alleged illegality that was made by the non-elected EU court, the very, very, very elected EU court, the very, very, very pro-globalist EU court. So we've got a massive range of coordination here between NGOs, the EU, which is again completely globalist owned and controlled, the international globalist media, all are very tightly coordinating around making a huge propaganda event that had nothing, in my view, had nothing spontaneous about it whatsoever. Now, the depiction of there's a new political movement in Poland, which is effectively an anti-EU party, and depending on whose news you read or follow, then there's somewhere between like 11 and 15% of the population that are polled that are supposedly in favour of this or support it or might support it in an election. And there's an election, a Polish election, not too far away. So the globalists are pulling out all stops to try and influence that election while accusing everyone else of being anti-democratic, by the way. Again, the chutzpah is unbelievable. But these are the sort of things that are going on in Poland. And as I see it, this is the globalists doing everything they can to undermine the Polish election and undermine the will of the people and influence an election over which they should be just letting it play out of its own accord, given that it's a sovereign state. But effectively, the globalists don't recognise sovereign states anymore. You're just part of the globalist morass, and in their view, and therefore any idea that politicians elected by the Polish people should have any say over what happens in Poland is in itself an outrage in the minds of these people. So I hope Poland holds the line and succeeds. You've been Tacitus today, your Pushback Channel. Thank you for listening.